Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Norwich Talk for another podcast. We're here today with Alfie, not Billy from the Revere, and just Alfie. You're going to be carrying the Revere on your own, and Mr. Stuart Hodge. Guys, how are we?
I'm great. I was just wondering, how heavy is the Revere end if you're carrying it?
Someone say carry anyway, but no, I'm joking. It's weird being on my own. I'm usually we always come as a two, so it's weird to only be on my own now. But I know.
You are looking
When
quite
two become one.
This is sort of Alfie's initiation in terms of his solo career. That will happen at one point. I'm just throwing that into the hat nice and early. But today we're going to chat a bit about Norwich City signings, and I'm going to do something that I didn't really want to do in terms of numbers and sort of get bogged down into ratings, but we're going to do it anyway because I often do things that I say I'm not going to do. But that is what we're going to do today. We'll maybe mention Luton. Hodge is going to whip Minnie Mouse at some point, which I'm looking forward to. So that's a nice surprise. For whenever that happens in the podcast, I'm sure will be just as surprised as you watching. But we're going to go through most of the signings. We're not going to talk about. I've already forgotten his name. There she is. Is it Matthew Dennis, the under 23s guy?
Yep.
Yeah.
And what's New Zealand? Sebastian Soto. We aren't going to mention them. We're just going to mention sort of these players who will potentially be playing for Norwich City throughout the remainder of the season. Some of them played yesterday against Luton, but as I said, we're going to try and sort of steer clear of that game. Because I don't think anyone really enjoyed it. Not that I even saw it at all. But yeah, we're going to start with... Who should we start with, lads? Anyone got a suggestion?
Kieran Dowell.
Kieran Dowell. Who's taking the floor on this then? Because I think Billy was a big fan, and he's got that he can't be here to sort of to chat about him. So Alfie, you're gonna take that torch from him, aren't you?
You know what? We both kind of stood on the same kind of footprint with this one in the way that we were so shocked when it coming through. It was one of those signings which I remember putting on my phone out of work when it got announced, and I was like, no way. Like it was one of those like, what kind of moments where if you're anyone who kind of plays any kind of football manager or anything, Kieran Dowell's been about for years, and you wouldn't know that he's still a really good young prospect who's never really had his chance, because he's always been going out on loan to different clubs. But he's a player that I class as established at the championship level anyway. Like all you have to do is kind of look at how he ended the season with Wigan, and it's such a shame they went down. But aside from that, they were playing some great football, and he was such a huge part of that. So I kind of, and again, it's such a small sample size to go off. But even from like the snippet we've seen of him yesterday, like the kind of direct runs through the middle. I mean, he was playing out on the right at the start, which was really quite weird because he's not someone that I typically want to see out on the right, in the kind of regular season. But when he kind of goes through the middle and drives through the kind of defense, I just think things happen, and I really am. I'm excited to kind of see how he goes this year. And out of everyone, I would say now, and kind of as you'll, I guess, as we're going to rate them, he is for me the best signing we've made so far.
That's a really interesting point, and you spoke a bit about yesterday. In terms of him playing out wide. I think that's something you see quite a lot in football now. And I remember sort of thinking it's more of a home team thing. I remember seeing Johnny Howson for Norwich out on the right, Todd Cantwell as well at some point in the 18-19 season. And it's this idea of a sort of central player who can sort of bring the ball inside and play the way that Norwich City like to play. Emi Buendia as well likes to do it, although I sort of have him down as a winger, although Hodge on this was telling me how he should be a 10. So it's sort of this natural idea that the player carries it inside. Go on, Hodge.
Listen, I'll tell you what, right? Modern football's fun because space is space, right? And things change, and it's all about fluidity. It's all about the way that these kind of things... What you want is you want players that can play various roles, but not just that. You want players that naturally overlap and change positions and sort of to make opposition defences think. So especially if you're playing a formation that's got three behind a striker, that's how you make things happen. It's exactly what the team who wear a shirt like this did not do. You kind of ruined the joke, but I was going to say I've got one of the Scotland team here with me. Nah, but I think the thing is you want players that do different things. With Emi, I think he's got the natural game of a 10, but I think part of what gives him the space to operate is playing him as a wide man who drifts inside. I think that really sort of helps him, and it helps him work his magic, because whoever's sort of meant to be watching him is then like, oh, right, where's he gone? Kieran Dowell, my thinking on that is... I think you made a really good point, Alfie. It's one of those things where a lot of these big Premier League clubs, they'll have these young talents that they just can't find space for years. And it's not because they're not a good player, and it's not because they're not even necessarily a Premier League caliber player. It's just that they've got players who are more established or international stars or whatever in those positions. So there's no room for that player to try and break in. And the best thing for the development of the player is to go out on loan and to develop his game that way. Kieran Dowell's a fine example of that. He's a fine exponent of that. And he's developed into a player who probably could hold his own in the Premier League just about, I would say. In the Championship, I think it's so exciting because the system that Norwich City play and the way that we play really suits him. So he's been part of a Wigan team that were defensively very, very sort of solid and that kind of thing. But at Norwich City, and I mean, they were good going forward, but it was within a structure. At Norwich, he's going to get a bit of freedom to try and express himself, to try some different stuff. And the whole sort of Farke ball thing could really, really, really suit his game. I also think from Norwich City's point of view, if you look at what was missing last year, there's loads of things that people talk about. They talk about strikers, defenders, midfielders, whatever. I think the big problem was towards the end of the season, we seemed to have the most success when Stiepermann was playing at the 10. And that tells me that you need someone who's a bit more dynamic, really, in that role. Kieran Dowell fits that bill.
Mm-hmm. I think in terms of physicality, Dowell's going to have to play out on the right unless there is a massive change in system. Because you said there, Stiepermann holds that role so well. Now, I don't know how sort of replaceable he is. I don't know if there's another player out there like him at the moment, especially in terms of this idea of Norwich bringing another person in. But one thing for me where I wasn't that excited for Kieran Dowell, I won't lie to you, but one thing where I've sort of come around at this point is the fact that he has so much experience. And as you said, he's been out on loan at different clubs. He's got various different experiences. He's been promoted by Sheffield United. I think he was sort of the star man at Nottingham Forest, or he was intended to be. He's been at Wigan in a very different environment. They should have stayed up, but obviously all that went down. And I remember getting a message from In Good Nick, who's a Sheffield United fan. He was like, I'd messaged him straight away. I was like, what do you make of sort of Kieran Dowell? And he said, he's okay. Like, technically, he's very gifted, but he's a bit lightweight. And I thought that was very interesting because he's meant to be a 10. And as you alluded to there, Hodge, you sort of mentioned the physicality side of the game. So I was a bit like, okay, I don't really know where this is going. But we saw against Luton, he's sort of got that predatory instinct to sort of knock a ball into the goal. And he's sort of very technically good. And also, I think he won the Under-17s World Cup with England as well. So he's got bags and bags of experience.
He likes to shoot. And he's got loads of pace, right? In the modern game, the only example I can think of a world-class version of your old target man striker is the guy that plays with Russia, whose name escapes me momentarily. They've got a gigantic striker that they just feed off, and he's the only guy that I see that plays that role that doesn't just give free kicks away all the time. So I think this idea that you need to be big and strong, you need to not get shrugged off the ball, but in the modern game, speed trumps strength. I mean, you want both, but if you're going to have one or the other, then I think I would choose speed, because speed you can get by someone and then fall over and win a free kick, whereas if it comes to power, then you might be stronger, but then you might commit a foul trying to keep someone off the ball. So I think with the way the modern game's built, what you've got to think of as well is you've got to think of the way that the team's going to evolve this year. So what they identified as the big flaw last year was we had a midfield that didn't cover enough ground, really. Maybe not in terms of, I should be clearer there, not in terms of the stats of yards covered as much as the way that they did it, so moving as a cohesive midfield unit forward and back and doing that kind of thing. And it was that lack of physicality in the midfield that was established. Physicality can take various forms, but in terms of having someone that can cover ground, that's technically adept, and let's remember, Norwich City really struggled for goals. Kieran Dowell's a goal threat. He's a big goal threat, and that could be very important.
What are we making of that in terms of a rating out of 10 then? I went for hang on, let me get that in front of me. I think I went for an 8 because it was like, I was impressed with it. I went for a 7 actually, because mainly I wasn't that excited for it. I'm coming around to the idea now. And I think sort of given all of his experience to get back into the Premier League, you're going to need that sort of championship experience. I feel what you're saying out of 10.
I think the big thing I'd say is just before I give you the rating is that you still got to remember that he's 22. Like, this kid's got bags of abilities and experience, and effectively he's not even in like anywhere close to his prime yet as well. So for right now, I would personally say a 9 out of 10. I know Billy would say an 11 out of 10. That's the only one I actually told me to mention. But I'd say for me personally, 9 out of 10 right now for his ability.
That's fair enough. Hodge?
I think given the outlay was probably very small for a player of that talent, because that's got to be a consideration here is value for money in terms of the rating that we're getting based on what we assess the signing to be like in terms of standard of player and fit with the team. So we've all got a criteria that we're getting in here. But how was it you phrased it, Ben? Like what was the exact because you had one short sentence you said that you were using as the criteria, but I'm going to tell you what I'm bringing into it in terms of my thinking.
In terms of the rating?
Yeah, so you said just rate the standard
quality
of signing, right? So I'm bringing into that value for money. Yeah. I'm bringing into that potential fit with the team and the sort of the way the team has looked to adapt this summer, and how good they are or how good they could be. So on that basis, I'm gonna fling a 0.5 in there. I'm gonna go in between you two and say an 8.5 out of 10. I think he's a player that Norwich City really needed, and I think we've got him at a very good rate, and the potential sell-on value here could be very high.
That's fair enough. I would agree with that in terms of, I think, quality of signing. It's pretty decent because we know it's on the cheap. Norwich City are always on the cheap, and that's not a bad thing. And we'll get on to how Norwich maybe are sort of looking to get away from that with the signing of Ben Gibson. We sort of timed this video quite well in the end, I think it turns out, because I had plans to sort of get this film before Ben Gibson, but it's happened after. So it'd be good to have a little bit of a chat about him. But I'm going to move on to Jacob Sorensen. What initial thoughts on him? I'll come to you first, Alfie. Jacob Sorensen, what does he do for you?
What I'd say is that because again, like with a lot of these players, like I haven't actually been able to see this guy play yet. So just going off pretty much what it looks from on a pay-per-view, which is, sometimes quite hard to judge. I'd say, again, looking at the age, it's a fantastic kind of age to buy someone at 22 years old. There's a lot of room for development or potential development. Of course, it's always kind of risky, kind of solely relying on that. I'd say it's hard to judge off the standard of football he's been playing to whether or not that will translate across to the Championship, or if we were to go up like the Premier League and how it develop again from there. But I'd say for the reported like very small fee that we've potentially paid for him, and as a player, a physical, a bit from what again is a bit of an aerial threat as well, but also a midfielder that can distribute it. If that happens and comes to fruition, that could be perfect for us because again, I don't want to reference too much to the Luton game, but having who I think it was Tete next to, I can't actually remember it was. Thank God.
Lucas Rupp.
Tete and Rupp yesterday. It was crying out for someone like him, someone to really get stuck in with a more physical Luton side. And I think in the division that we're playing in, a taller midfielder who can distribute it, but has also got that kind of physicality that we kind of alluded to earlier. I just think it's something which we've kind of been needing. Not only the year we went up, really, because we've always had quite small kind of like even Tom Tribal was our enforcer that year, and he's like 5'9", 5'10". So to have someone a little bit taller, a little bit more physical, but can still hopefully distribute the ball, it looks great on paper. It's just what transpires from there. That's what you got to kind of judge it on.
I think what's interesting for me is that when he initially was going to be signed for Norwich, I remember speaking to Connor about it, and he was telling me he's sort of a 6 and he's a tribal, but sort of more athletic. And then recently he said that naturally he's an 8 and he's sort of being converted into the 6. Now, for the same reason that I'm going to sort of go mental about Ollie Skip. Is it Ollie or Josh Skip, by the way? Because I've got Josh Skip written down here for some reason.
No, it's Oliver Skip.
Oliver Skip. Where on earth is that? That's 3 times I've done it on videos now. I've called him Josh Skip. But I'm going for the same reasons that I'll sort of go crazy about him. The identification of the problem is sort of why I like Sorensen so much, because we spoke about this on our first podcast together, Hodge, when we spoke about whether Daniel Farke should be sacked. The issue is a lack of protection of the back four. And a player like Sorensen, a player like Skip sort of come in to sort of fix that problem. I don't think there's a real lack of quality within that back four. We'll get into that with Ben Gibson. But a player like Jacob Sorensen, who's sort of technically able, of what we've read, of course, we've not actually seen him play properly yet, bar a couple of appearances in Germany, on really dodgy pitches at that as well. So I don't think you can see sort of the best of the player in them circumstances. But this sort of player really excites me. And until Ollie Skip came in, this was, for me, the signing that excited me the most. And I'm very, very interested to see how he gets on. You make a really good point, Alfie, about this idea of the fact that he's coming in to a very physical league. That, you know, when you come to England, the hardest league to join, controversially, whatever, maybe is the Championship, because it's so unpredictable, it's so physical, it's so sort of competitive. And, you know, he's going to have to sort of sink or swim in the Championship. We've seen time and time again.
I would take issue with that just based on how we got absolutely mullered at the end of last season in the Premier League. But I do see where you're coming from in terms of someone who's coming from a different culture. If you're coming from Spain, say, going to the Championship, it's like, whoa, right, what's happening here, man? But that's not so much the case, I don't think, with a player from the Danish Superliga. I think with Jacob Sorensen, you've got someone who has stature, someone who, as well as that, build. I mean, the 6 and 8 argument is the old sort of Kenny McLean kind of thing. Like, what is he? Kenny McLean's more of a creator, I would say, like in terms of his nature in midfield. But Jacob Sorensen's your proper box to box.
I'm just going to steam. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, they could work next to each other, but that's the thing, right? Norwich City have bought midfielders to give them options and dynamism in the middle of the park. Jacob Sorensen is a massive part of that because he's a proper box-to-box. He'll break up stuff at one end. He'll try and get on the end of stuff at the other. I think he's, from what I could see in terms of the data, which is a big part in modern football recruitment. And actually, you mentioned Connor, that there was a really interesting piece he did on the role that data plays in signings now. Jacob Sorensen, all of the stuff that I saw in him was absolutely glowing in terms of the kind of data reports and that side of it. That's very, very encouraging. Anything I saw in clips made me think, right, this good big guy. He's exactly the type of midfielder that we need. At that stage, because remember, that was earlier in the recruitment process. At that stage, I was like, oh, we have needed this signing so much. I thought he was, I mean, to be honest, until recently, he was my pick of the summer signings. I'm going to have a top 3 who are tied at the top and with the same rating. So I'm giving him a 9 out of 10. And he's one of the 3 that's got a 9.
I went for an 8.5. What about you, Alf?
I'm going to go for an 8.
So we're all pretty excited for him then. I think, do you know what? I think we'll go on to Ollie Skip because I think we can sort of do this positionally, can't we? What we're saying about Ollie Skip, because I just sort of want to, actually, that's complete license. I want to copy and paste my points. I don't. I want to go on about the fact that this is a guy who, now this might be me sort of being blinded by my inspiration, and that's like amazement at Jose Mourinho from the Spurs documentary. But this is a guy who's been sort of working with him very closely for a long time, and that's only valuable experience. This is a guy who's been training with some of the Premier League's better players. I'm not going to say best because it is Tottenham, but some of the better players. And I just like, it's really, really exciting to me because he's this young English talent and he's so well spoken. And it's this idea that he'd done his research before coming to Norwich. I know that sounds stupid to sort of point it out, but it's like this guy had so many options. I think couldn't he have gone to Fulham in the Premier League? And it's like he chose Norwich City. It definitely means he wants to be here. Go on.
Now, that is a massive point. I think that underlines, for all of the negativity flying around, and stay off Norwich City Twitter and Facebook after a meaningless defeat to Luton, which just means we don't play 100 games in 25 days. Honestly, the overreaction is one thing that I'm just like, wow, people need to chill out. This is a blessing in disguise. I'm not saying they chucked the game, but I don't think club power brokers will have been heartbroken at that Carabao Cup exit, let's say that, given the particular circumstances of it. Although, of course, they wouldn't want to go out any competition. I have to underline that. But with that in mind, right, if you look at the Norwich City have now built a team, and I've now built a system, I've now built a club culture that is an elite club. Spurs are an elite club, despite sort of underperforming last season and getting stuffed in the cup. What a night that was. But Spurs are a top football club. They're one of the top Premier League elite. They're one of the top 6. And they have a player who's come through their academy, a gifted young star, a guy who's played a fair bit of football for them as well. And he's decided that where he wants to carry on his sort of football journey is not getting some reps in the Premier League necessarily with Fulham, but to play in what's hopefully going to be a successful Championship team with Norwich. That is massive for Norwich City. And that is a complete underlining of what has been built. So despite relegation and despite all the negativity justifiably around that, that shows you what's been built. Not just the actual developments in terms of facilities and stuff at Colney. What's been built is a club that now top young talents are saying, I want to go there to play my football. I want to go there for a year. That is a complete vindication of Norwich's Stuart Webber, Daniel Farke revolution. And Oliver Skipp is, we shouldn't, let's be honest, on the Championship, we should not be getting a player of that calibre. That is a real coup for us. And on that basis, I'm going to disregard, because I've just basically done these ratings off the top of my head. I was going to have a top three. No, in fact, because it's not a permanent deal, I'm going to stick with what I said. He's a 9 out of 10. But in terms of the actual talent of player that we're getting, that's a 10 out of 10 signing if it was a permanent deal, man.
Let's not forget that he was coached by Pochettino, sort of selected by him. I went on a bit about, I sort of realised as well saying it, I went on about Mourinho, but this is a guy who was selected by Pochettino. And Pochettino, for what anyone might think about him, he's like Daniel Farke. He produces such good young players, and he sort of, when I say produce, maybe he's brought a few in, but like he still developed them and made them into very good players. Have they won any trophies? No, they haven't, but they're still very good players nonetheless. And hopefully Ollie Skipp can come here, help us win a trophy, whatever that trophy is. Fingers crossed it's the Championship, but let's not forget that. Alf, what are you making of Ollie Skipp, man? Is there anything you can say? Because I feel like we've covered it all already.
I guess, right, to only, because all I can say is that we spoke about it earlier of like the players which you find at top teams where they're almost not quite there for an opportunity at the first team level, like a Kieran Dow was before. Or it's almost like Kieran Dow a couple of years ago. Like he's at that point where he's like, you know what, I know there's a place for me here, but I don't think it's now, and I need to go somewhere which is going to really benefit me. When I come back in a year's time, we can all go, wow, like what progression I've made. And it's nice to see a player kind of like Angus Gunn did, and like Patrick Roberts did, even before however they turned out. Like it's nice to see players keep wanting to come here. The only thing, right, and just to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, the only thing I'm a bit nervous about, not from Oliver Skipp's point of view, but from a Norwich point of view, is our previous histories with loan signings, and how if this Oliver Skipp goes wrong in the way that other loans have gone, and I don't think it's easy to compare him to the likes of Patrick Roberts, because with some of the other youngsters we've had in, sometimes people could put it down to things like attitude and just not being good enough. And I think he's plenty good enough. Like you said, talent-wise, I think he's one of the best youngsters we've ever had come through, even though it's not one of our own. Mm-hmm. But it does make me a little bit nervous that if this doesn't go to plan, will that prevent us in the future getting these players coming? Because if a Mourinho sits there and goes, well, I have a lot of hope for this kid, and he's gone here, and Jacob Sorensen's had a master season, they're not going to play both of those together. That's my only worry. But on the whole, every other point you guys have raised, spot on. I completely agree.
I think that's just that kind of like usual sort of worry that fans have. It's like, oh, how's this going to impact us in the future? I think the fact that Norwich City got Patrick Roberts even last year, even despite how that turned out, shows that the big clubs like the development culture that we are building here. And that's the thing. I don't think we're going to touch on Jamal Lewis that much, but people talking about going to sort of Newcastle looks like the wheels are in motion with that now. Yeah, Premier League reps, really, really good. But my opinion, and this probably won't be very popular by many Norwich fans, given all the nonsense on Twitter with Liverpool fans that's flying around. But in terms of a development culture, I reckon you are better playing 10 games a season and training with Jurgen Klopp than you are training with Steve Bruce's Newcastle in a really defensive system, when that is Jamal's strength anyway, right? So he's not necessarily going to be exploring the parts of his game that he's seeking to develop, the attacking side. So I wonder, would Jamal be better doing another year with Norwich in the Championship? I think there's an argument to be said that in order to develop his game, he's better playing in a team or in a system where he's going to get to explore the attacking side of his game, and that is the difference. Whereas at Newcastle, it's going to be all about sort of defensive solidity and all of that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think it's a fair point, Alfie. There's a discussion to be had about how players are going to best develop, but Norwich City seem to be building these relationships with the big clubs, and I think the proof is in the pudding in terms of the academy youngsters we're pulling through. But it's good to have a bit of prudence, though, I've got to say, about any signing. Because, we could all get really excited by the signings on paper. But then if we get to 10 games in and we've won 2 or 3 of them, it's not going to be worth much, is it?
No,
Do you know what?
absolutely.
I'll say to you, Alfie, what settled my nerves about Skip. I had the same concern in terms of sort of this idea of Norwich's last season loans not being brilliant. And when I say not being brilliant, I mean pretty shy. They were pretty terrible, weren't they? But at the same time, in the Championship, we've had good loans. Like Angus Gunn, you mentioned. Also, quickly on Angus Gunn, what the hell is Billy doing putting him in his Norwich City all-time 11?
Yeah.
I was really desperate to get him on and just have a word about that because that rattled my cage.
He had a few of the same ones as me. I don't know what you thought of mine. You get any opinion on that?
You had Basong and Zimmerman, didn't you? I did as well. I think we the other ones were pretty similar. But people who put Timu Pukki over Grant Holt need to give their sort of skull a wobble.
I didn't get asked.
Did you, Hodgie?
I absolutely did do
weirdo,
that,
mate. You're not coming back on. No, that for me, that's just strange. Like mainly just because Grant Holt is just Pookie's not that close. I was going to say nowhere near because he sort of is, but he's not near Grant Holt in terms of club legend status for me at all. Golden boot against or for the 18-19, whatever, sure, that's brilliant. But it's just the fact that Holty came with us from League One into the Premier League, ripped it up in the Premier League, should have played for England. I think it's personality as well does it for me, but he's much more of a legend than Pukki.
I'm not arguing that Grant Holt is a bigger Norwich City Club legend than Timu Pukki. Is Timu Pukki a better striker? Yes, he is. Just all about opinions, bro.
Well, no, do you know, it depends how you read the question. I can't actually remember what the question.
Anyway, we're getting distracted, my friend. I apologise.
That's fine. We should also just say that was Singing from the Nest as well.
Yeah.
So make sure you go and read that. Have you done one yet, Alfie?
Haven't been asked yet.
Have you not?
Ask Alfie.
There you go. Ask Alfie.
Hashtag Ask Alfie.
Hashtag Ask Alfie. Where were we? I'm not going to lie to you. I've completely got lost.
We're on ratings for Oliver Skip.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. I gave him a 9.5. Hodge, you gave him a 9.
It would be as well.
It was going to be a 10. If it's a permanent signing, it's a 10. It's like an actual 10 out of 10.
That's never going to happen permanently, was it? Sadly for us. I do feel like becoming too attached to him and then being like, Delia sign, like Mitchell Dykes, like Delia sign him up.
Yeah.
Off he goes.
Mitchell Dykes right. See, the thing about him is he was a player that wasn't happy outside of his native country. That was the main problem with him. It was very, very hard to convince him to even come here on loan. And then he got very homesick. I think he's quite close to his family and stuff like that. That's the thing about footballers that people often forget. It's always like it's about the football. Exactly. It's like he's a human being, and he's quite a home bird. So that was why I didn't have with Mitchell Dykes. He was there the season I was commentating. I loved him.
I do remember when he bounced Matt Ritchie off him. I was about to call him Lionel Richie. What is going on with names today, man? Matt Ritchie. I remember listening to the comms, and I was like, that is just what you love to hear and what you love to see as well. And sadly, he didn't stay.
Nah, that was good fun. I liked Mitchell Dykes a lot. I thought he was good. I thought he was quite hard as well. I like good hard fullback.
So, Hodge, you did just want to mention why you have.
I just want to give a bit of context, right? So, this is my niece's Millie's toy. I don't just keep random Disney toys, but we're having a good time, aren't we, Minnie?
This is actually a lie, and this is your toy, and your nickname is Millie.
That's it. Billy Moo. Millie Molly Mandy, sweet of sugar candy. That's me.
Brilliant. Right. Who should we move on to next, guys? Do we have anyone particularly we'd like to talk about? Someone short, someone we can speak about quickly.
Ballymunba!
I was literally about to say Ballymunba. I'm happy to give him an 8 out of 10 and just say he's a decent signing because I honestly have no idea. I don't know anything about him.
I think it's a very good piece of recruitment from the guys in the recruitment team because I think it's one of them. It's kind of plucked sort of somewhat from nowhere. Like Ballymunba wasn't one of the names. Like, I mean, FM's always a good barometer. Football Manager, you go on like how good were they in last year's game, right? Ballymunba was a central midfielder who was kind of pretty ordinary. But I think Ballymunba's one of those players who, I mean, judging on the evidence, I didn't see the Luton game. I've been working the last couple of days, sort of doing a couple of Preston games actually. Sheffield United Preston and then Everton Preston. So I know them quite well. Head of the first home game of the season. That's it. I didn't bump into Alec. It's weird, man. Like, see, doing a game in the COVID era, I'm like, normally like, I would have been able to go over and have a chat and stuff like that, but it's all different zones that you've got to be in. So it's quite weird being a member of the press and this sort of new situation that we're in now. Anyway, I digress. Ballymumba, from everything I can hear in the Luton game, looked like a really, really good option. And should we lose Max Aarons, we've got a young dynamic man who's ready to step in, seems a good athlete, and another good piece of recruitment. Quite happy to give that an 8 myself as well. But because, just on the basis, it's the lowest of my rating so far, by the way, but that's just on the basis that I don't know enough about him to give him any more than that. But I think it's a very good piece of recruitment. I think there's no risk to it, really. Yeah. From our point of view, it's kind of a win or not lose very much if it doesn't quite work out for the lad, you know?
Well, he is 18 years old, isn't he?
Exactly. So if we send him out on loan for a couple of seasons, if that was the way it was to turn out, and if to turn out a good player in 2-3 years' time, Stuart Webber's often said, I think you'll see like a lot of the kind of fruits of what I've done after I've gone, and he could be an example of that, potentially.
Yeah.
I was very intrigued to kind of see what kind of role he would play. I was honestly anticipating he'd probably go out on loan or something, because just naturally as an 18-year-old, I think we kind of got him at a price which was way under. We just kind of took advantage of the situation that Sunderland was in, which, you know, along the line, 347,000 is like nothing. So as a young Englishman, you're bound to kind of make profit on that in any essence if you are kind of looking at the Moneyball way that we kind of go about our signings. But I think from what I saw against Luton, a lot of shades of Max Aarons in him in the way that he kind of up and down the pitch, got a nice kind of low cross on him as well a couple of times. Someone like Hugo almost got on the end of them. So you can only imagine that next season, if he was to step in, he looked really comfortable. And as an 18-year-old playing at the level which we will be at, I think it's a fantastic bit of business. I'd honestly give it an 8.5 personally.
8.5 and an 8 for me and you, Hodge, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, guys, I want to move on to Xavi Quintilla, another signing who I have very few words for. Hodge, do you want to go for the full Spanish pronunciation?
Xavi Quintilla.
There you go. Is that something we've got to maintain now, or can that just be your thing?
Call him what you want, as long as we know. Big XQ.
Big XQ.
No, I don't know. Maybe he's actually like part of MI5, and it's like he's kind of two different code people. So he's like Q's mate XQ. I don't know. Anyway, Xavi, nice. Xavi Quintilla is a player who I saw a little bit of in my time kind of commentating on Spanish games and stuff. I think he's someone that is very much been bought in the what if Jamal Lewis departs the club kind of event. He can also cover at centre-back. It's not as natural to him as sort of playing at full-back, but I always think if you think of full-backs that can cover at centre-back, it tells you a bit about the kind of full-back that they are. Max Aarons isn't going to be playing alongside Christoph Zimmermann or Ben Godfrey, is he? But Xavi, being a Spanish player as well, is technically adept. He's a fairly good athlete and stuff as well. I just think it's a signing that if Jamal was to have stayed, we're kind of assuming he's going now, would have provided depth. But now what you've got is I think, moving forward, two good and contrasting options competing for the left back slot. You've got Sam McCallum, who's obviously more sort of dynamic and maybe kind of attacking in mind as well, has been quite sort of solid as well himself. And Xavi's maybe a bit more poised, a bit bigger. And again, it's just another signing where we've brought in a player that is he's just a bit different, gives us a different option. There's just more depth, more texture to the whole squad. And Quintilla is another part of that. And I think, given his pedigree, I think you've got to rate it as another good signing. We're going like with high ratings across the board here, and I think that's a sign of how good the recruitment's been. That's another 8 out of 10 for me. I think he's another one that should prove to be quite successful. Whether he's going to be a massive hit for Norwich, I mean, that remains to be seen. But I think it's another good piece of recruitment, yeah.
Do you know what is really bizarre to me is when I was doing my research, because obviously I don't know if you guys actually watch them, but I make sort of these transfer videos where I just do a lot of research and I sort of go over what I've seen within the research. And what was really weird is I use Transfer Market usually. I use whoscored.com as well, and that's for stats and stuff. And I decided to dip into the whoscored.com side of opinions, etc. And I saw for Javi Quintilla, I saw his cons being attacking, defending, passing, and crossing as a con. So I was like, what does he bring to the team then? I'm very confused if he's any good or not. I know you mentioned there he is sort of meant to be this typical Spanish player who likes to venture forward, but what is
I don't know about typical. I think he's kind of poised, so he's quite relaxed on the ball. I don't think he's going to be someone that's sort of. I mean, he'll get up and down, but he's not going to be like sort of Max Aarons, where there's sort of a rocket up his backside and he's constantly heading up and down the line. I don't think he's that kind of player. He's more of a sort of poised player who will kind of help with the sort of overall creating and kind of pass and move sort of type stuff. That's the mode in which he's Spanish, less than sort of this kind of dynamic up and down fullback. As I say, I think that's more Sam McCallum.
What do you make of Quintilla then, Alf?
I'm really interested to see which out of Quintilla, if that's how you say it, and
Muy bien, tío.
and McCallum, which one really kind of stakes a claim for that starting left back role? Because even though it hasn't happened, we're kind of anticipating, like you say, that there is very kind of deep or in agreement, some kind of deal with Newcastle for Jamal Lewis. So, I mean, I think it's almost like the best kind of deals when you're signing a player from abroad sometimes, where you get them on that initial year's loan with the view to permanent, and it not being like an extortion. I think it was like reported like 3 million or something like that. And, you know, if you were to kind of have a Javi Quintilla go off and have an outstanding season, 3 million for a left back is absolutely nothing, you know. So I think it's one of those ones where it's so risk-free, because if Lewis stays, you know, McCallum can go out on loan and he's here for a year as a backup, and then you just let him go back. If not, you've got a player here that if he does excel or he's a really good backup and you do manage to go up, he's there at a really affordable price tag. I think from what I've heard of him so far, and I guess just looking into it, he played a good amount of games for an established top tier Spanish league team. And you've got to look at that, you know, 17, 18, 19 games or whatever it was. You know, you've got to have something about you to be able to fill in a kind of defensive role for a team like for Villarreal, was it that he played for?
Yeah, Villarreal.
So on paper, it looks like just a smart move. It's not like going to, you know, set the world alight, but it just looks like a smart transfer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, by the way, bang on. That's exactly it. It's risk-free, smart move, decent. What's your rating, man?
8.
I'll put 8 as well, right? But mine was blind.
Incidentally, are you recording these, Ben, so that we can get an overall average metric?
Jordan can do that in post, mate.
Good
that
stuff.
Sounds like it requires some brains, so we'll let Jordan do that.
Sounds good to me.
What's yours then, Hodge? Did you say?
I said an 8 as well.
8, right, okay.
Yeah, I think it's just it's another one where, yeah, I think the point that Alfie made there, just about having played that amount of games for Villarreal, you're no mug. The point we made earlier on regarding adapting to the Championship, I think you made it in regards to Sorensen, Ben. That is the potential question mark with Quintilla. Is he going to be able to adapt to the variation in pace and the way teams play and that kind of thing quite as quickly? Because that's going to be the thing. Sam McCallum, even though he's played at a lower level, has played in English football.
Yeah.
Where Diaz coming from a different sort of style of football, and just the mentality is a wee bit different, and the kind of culture of how they approach it. So with that in mind, that's going to be the challenge for him. But yeah, as you say, Alfie, it's so exciting to see two really kind of different options competing for that left back slot. That's actually a really exciting thing for me to watch going into the new season, and it's going to be interesting to see who wins that jersey.
I'll tell you what I think is interesting is that in sort of Daniel Farke's first season and his second season, I won't really say last season, mainly because I don't want to talk about it, but when players were brought in, Daniel Farke himself and sort of his coaching staff were still adapting to England, to the Championship, whereas this time around, this is, I would say, a fairly experienced Championship manager. Now, compared to some of the other managers in the league, like Neil Warnock, say, Neil Harris, etc., they've got far more experience. But any player that comes in and will be facing that challenge, which is pretty much every player who comes in terms of adapting to England and the Championship specifically, will have a manager or a head coach who is used to this country, used to the league, knows how it works. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to do it all over again, but I think it's a bit more of an advantage. And in terms of being more optimistic, I think that's perhaps why I'm a little bit more optimistic about, say, a Javi Quintilla now, in terms of this idea that Daniel Farke, he knows the league and he can perhaps perhaps is the key word there, do it again. But I think we'll go to Przemysław Pojeta, and then we'll end on Jordan Hughes and Ben Gibson.
Excuse me, man. Wow.
Have I
Do that
butchered
again. No, you've done it beautifully. Do it
What,
again.
Przemysław Pojeta?
Oh, that's lovely.
Do you know what? It's because there was someone who commented on when I made the sort of the rumor video. He said, just put their name into Google Translate and that's it. And I was like, so I've been doing that since, apart from for Xavi Quintilla, who I'm going to call him Quintilla there, just for the bands to annoy Hodge. But Przemysław Pojeta. I've had an interesting conversation about him with Connor. And he said to me that he thinks that he's going to frustrate people this season because he's a very quick winger. And you got this impression from the actual signing itself. And in terms of doing the research, you could see he's very, very quick. He's got that sort of, the word gets used a lot, but I can't think of an alternative. He's very raw. And I think that type of player, we've seen it before at Norwich, Ono Hernandez being the prime example, very quick, very raw. And it's going to be very much a case of, can Daniel Farke coach him into being a good player? Can he? Yes. Will he? Probably. But I think Pojeta could be a player that frustrates us. I'm very excited about him. This is, again, please fact check me, but I'll mention him again. Connor said to me, apparently he can be as quick as a Adama Traore. So make sure you quote that. Apparently can be as quick as a Adama Traore, which really excites me. And my main sort of praise for the transfer and the source of my excitement is the fact that he gives Norwich that plan B. And this idea of a plan B is something that we talk about a lot and have spoken about a lot. I remember when I came on your podcast, Alfie, we spoke a lot about plan B. And Pojeta provides that sort of a bit more strength to a player like Ono Hernandez, who comes in and just has that ability to run at a defender, knock a ball around him and just sort of go for it. Norwich didn't have that last season. And I think that's where we sort of went wrong a little bit. You look at the restart, and I think the best player, one of the better players, was Ono Hernandez, because he had that sort of direct ability. I'm not going to say Amy Buendia wasn't sort of his usual self, but I don't think he was, in terms of this idea that he could sort of dribble past players. That wasn't really happening for him. Whereas Hernandez was a bit more lucky because he had that pace and that acceleration. But that's my sort of emotional monologue on Pojeta. Who wants to take the floor on him then?
I mean, I've got a couple of opinions on him for sure. I definitely agree. We spoke a lot about a plan B, and I think it's so nice to have such an injection of pace. And I know we've got O'Neill on the same side, but it's so. I guess the way I typically describe our kind of wingers with how we've been playing under Daniel Farke, you've got a lot of almost like converted number 10s, and we spoke about it a bit earlier with Kieran Dow, and you've got a lot of converted number 10s which are kind of there to cut inside and play their way into the kind of final third. Whereas with him, it's like you could just stick a ball into the channel late game, in behind the defense, and if he's on and he is as quick as you say, like that's a great out ball to have, and I think it's a different dimension which will make teams think about how they potentially set up against us. You bring him on 75th minute or something, you don't even have to start him, and you don't really know what could happen, and I think that's the nice thing for me, is it's not like he's good at cutting inside and playing it to the striker and building off, because we've got a lot of that. It's like, and even O'Neill to a degree, O'Neill loves to cut in. He's not really going to take it down the line that often. So it's, and I think that's the thing for me, is it's just a different dimension that we can go to. I'd be interested to see about the Traore thing, if he runs as powerful as him, because I think that's the big thing about him. I mean, the size of him.
I don't think it's possible.
But on the whole, I don't think you can really complain. It's a reasonably, I guess, high transfer fee for us, but really like 2.7 million or whatever it's listed as. It's when we've made the parachute payments and we've got a lot of assets here as well, like small little transfer fees like that, I don't think I'm really going to sit there and if it doesn't work out for him, go, wow, what a waste of money. But I think from everything I've seen, again, on paper, it's a really positive kind of gap that we needed, which we've now hopefully filled with him there as well.
He's also left-footed.
So that's an important thing. I think yous have done a really good job at extolling the potential virtues of the transfer. I think Pojeta is one of the players who we would potentially have needed last season more than we're going to need in the season that's coming up. Because last season, we were the team sitting in and looking to break on teams. This season, we're going to be the team that's trying to break down a defence that's set up with a lower block. So my concern is that because he's a player that thrives in space in behind, there's not going to be a great deal of that. So the challenge is going to be, how can he do in terms of, other than just going to the byline and crossing the ball, how can he do? And I do agree that it's good to have a player who is a winger of that type, of that sort of identity and mould. But how much damage is he going to do hitting the byline and hitting crosses into packed defences in the Championship, which full of sort of bigger, taller defenders head the ball away? How much use is that going to be for Norwich City if we are sort of playing and we're trying to break down a team that's got like 10 men behind the ball? That's the question for me with Placheta. And I think it's good to have a player that is as fast as him. The Adama Traore comparison, I know it was kind of made in a semi-banterish context, but Traore runs big, he runs powerful, and he carries the ball amazingly well. Placheta's more of an athlete and not quite on that level of sort of technician.
No way near, because absolute monster, isn't he?
Exactly. So, like, but I think when it comes to when it comes to Adama Traore's ability to carry the ball, he can dribble past the very best defenders, right? Placheta's coming from Poland, so on that basis, there's a lot for him to prove in terms of the jump and the caliber of football. The Polish Ekstraklasy is a good league, but it's not as good as the Championship. And I think the kind of defence he's going to be coming up against and the way they're constructed, as I say, it's going to be a challenge for him this season. He's a player that is going to have to develop his game to succeed at Norwich City. I believe that the club will think that he's obviously got the capabilities and aptitude to do that. But of all the signings that we're going to mention today, he's the one that I probably have the biggest question mark over, on the basis that I just don't know how useful he's going to be in this Championship campaign. The reason I'm going to give it a 7 is because over the longer term, I think it's a useful option. But it's the one that I've got the biggest sort of question marks over, and I feel that's the player that I'm going, right, show me you can do this, rather than just show me what you got. That's a Rick and Morty reference.
Brilliant. I don't watch that show. I don't think I would either. I've got 2 points. One's a question, one's a point. I'm going to start with the question because that's quick. I've got a quick question for you guys. Do you guys know who the ex-Norwich, I think it was 4 years ago, won that league's, the Polish Premier League's Player of the Season? Used to play for Norwich. Does anyone know that?
Sorry, give us the question again.
So an ex-Norwich City player, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, won, what's the Polish league called again, Hodge?
The Ekstraklasy. That's
it. He won the Player of the Season for the whole league.
Was this after he played for Norwich before?
Yeah. Scored in the Champions League against Real Madrid as well. You're going to kick yourselves.
Ricky?
No. Vadis Odizra-Foe.
I was going to say, but I thought he went to Belgium, not to Poland.
No, he's been to Poland. I don't know if he went to Belgium as well. He's been to Switzerland as well. He's done it all. I just thought that was really weird. The point is as well, which is the more important thing and the more relevant thing, is that I definitely understand what you're saying, Hodge, in regards to he would have been more useful last season. I definitely agree. And I sort of backed that up with the point where I basically said Hernandez was good after the restart because he was quick. That's what Norwich City needed. And I think this could be crazy. It probably is. But I think he could be Norwich City's Jordan Rhodes in terms of the 18-19 season, where he comes off the bench and provides something a little bit different. And that will be very different to that of which Jordan Rhodes provided. Now, technically, I'm not comparing them because I'm not that deluded. Not yet, anyway. But this idea that he could come off the bench and give Norwich sort of, plan B, maybe, whatever you want to call it, a ramped up plan A. But I think he very much will be a good for Norwich in terms of this idea that, I shouldn't say, there will be games where we're going to need some sort of late magic. And Jordan Rhodes isn't there. So a player like Placheta, is going to come off the bench for me, potentially, and change it. But then again, it sort of depends how the season goes in terms of whether he starts well, whether he's going to be that bench player. But I sort of see him as that sort of dynamic, different option for Daniel Farke, which he's definitely been lacking.
I'd definitely say he's an impact player, 100% from what I've seen so far. What I'd say is, though, is that his success really lies on the way that we play when he's on the pitch, because if he is someone who kind of gets to the byline, puts a cross in, we don't typically do that all that lot. Like unless he's got a man like another signing we'll probably go to in a moment, but Jordan Hugill on, like, Timu Puki can be rising above,
It depends on the
6'5"
sort of cross, though,
defenders.
doesn't it?
It does, and that's the thing that I'd say. But I'd say typically, like, we're not a team that goes for just relentless crossing. So his success, I think, will depend largely on how we set up and deploy ourselves when he's on the pitch, and that's what I'm intrigued to kind of see how that plan B that we talked about is.
I'm very excited for it. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think it's just because he's quick. That's what excites me. I went for an 8 out of 10. You obviously went for a 7 there, Hodgie.
I'll go for an 8 as well.
But overall, pretty excited for it. You mentioned the fee there. I didn't realise that was the fee, which is sort of confused me a little bit in terms of the role I think he'll play. But we know that fee never defines a player at Norwich City, so that just confuses me more, to be honest with you. But
No, and also players that play AML, Stephen Naismith, Yannick Vildscott.
Two really good players.
Yeah, I think the thing I would say just with fees is you pay the fee depending on the sort of league the player is coming from. You're not necessarily paying 2.7 million and expecting that to be better than Timu Puki in a free transfer. It's just to do with market conditions. It's to do with the market that you're getting them from. If Placheta was playing for a League One side, he would be like 10 million quid-ish. You know what I mean? Just because the fees in England are exorbitant and stupid, right? Same with the idea that you get Quintilla for what you get him for. It's just because the market is so bloated in England, which is why we go to so many foreign places for our signings. And that's what makes the likes of Ballymumba such an impressive capture, because you've managed to do that even within the English market. It's really, really hard to do now.
I definitely agree with that. Right, we'll go on to, I think, Jordan Hugill. I think we'll finish on Ben Gibson, because he is probably the most interesting one to talk about, because centre-back was the position that everyone was saying we needed to strengthen. But we'll go.
His name's Ben, so obviously you're going to say that.
Well, I think he's left-footed as well, like me. So, he's quite clearly a gifted player, which is going to sort of contradict what I'm going to say about him a little bit later. But Jordan Hugill, where on earth did Jordan Hugill come from? I remember reading that we were linked with Jordan Hugill, and I thought that was sort of one of them sort of ridiculous rumours that you see. But then within a couple of days, it came true. He signed for Norwich. He got given the number 9. He cost a little bit of dough. What? Just what? Why?
You know what, right? I stand by this in the way that I am actually really excited about him.
I am as well. That's what annoys me, Alfie. That's what confuses me.
There's a amount of realism here where you've got to be like, okay, is he going to get in ahead of Timu Puki next year? And as a starting point, I would say no, because I think, any player from that original side is honestly just the way that I guess it showed itself in the Premier League last time, is going to at least be given the opportunity out of merit, which is fair enough. But I think the thing is for me with Jordan Hugill is, and we spoke about it a bit earlier with when we spoke about Mitchell Dykes, which was, I still don't know how we went that far, but not a hard fullback, but just a proper hard striker. Someone who is just, you can get up in the defender's face, you can really start to create a bit of an issue. You can punt it long for him. I mean, the thought of him flicking balls onto Paqueta with the speed and behind, that really excites me as a potential plan B option. I think, for every Hugill, you have, a Pookie to kind of, even if they don't play off each other, if they are on the pitch at the same time, you have two different avenues that you can attack a team with. It's not okay, they only have Pookie, this is all we need to expect. It's okay, they might start with Hugill and then they're going to go potentially a different route. And I think that's a nice thing for me, is it's a manager's headache when you've got a player like Jordan Hugill there, because he's so different to what we have. It's like two different teams are going to be playing, and I think that's a nice thing for me. And people talk about how much it is. Yeah, he's a little bit older, but he's English. You're going to pay a higher fee anyway. He has a lot of, I guess, money attached to him baggage wise with his wage. So, you're going to have to fork out somewhere. So I wouldn't really complain about what we've spent for him. If it works out, fantastic. But on the whole, I'd just say it's a different signing, and that's what excites me the most about it.
Yeah,
it's not putting the club at risk, is it? Finance-wise,
no, we've never in none of our business we've done since the current regime's come in has put the club in any sort of jeopardy. You asked where this came from, Ben. It came from West Ham. And with the situation with Grady Diangana, and you see Mark Noble tweeting about how, we've lost a really good young player. It's my rubbish, Mark Noble. I don't know if he has, but regardless of that, right, something is amiss. at West Ham United, right? So
Well,
there could be an element. There could be an element of Jordan Hugo going, yeah, I don't want to be part of this club culture. There's also the fact that they clearly don't fancy him enough for the Premier League because they keep shipping him out on loan.
Well, he was a weird signing anyway, wasn't he, for West Ham?
He was. And I think the thing is, right, for me, you're getting someone who is a totally different type of striker from Teemu Pukki, but a proven championship striker. Someone that you know is going to come in and he's not just going to provide a bit of a goal threat, which, by the way, having watched Preston twice in 48 hours, the one thing they were lacking was a Jordan Hugo, and it wouldn't surprise me. In fact, I've heard whispers that they're in the market for the new Jordan Hugo, should they be able to unearth them. And I know that they really, really rated him highly. So obviously the management team that went on to Preston and worked with him there towards the end of his time there was your Alex Neil, Frankie McAvoy, sort of former Norwich guys. They thought he was like a really, really top operator. And I know that they were really keen on him. He's obviously done what he did with QPR as well. There's a lot there to say that this is a really exciting signing for Norwich City. How much game time he'll get remains questionable, but what really plays into his favour and into the club's favour in a way is basically what you're doing is you're taking the pressure off Teemu Pukki. You're saying, look, even if you score 10 this season, right, we're bringing in someone else who can maybe fill some of that gap depending on how Teemu's feeling. Because the thing is, footballers before COVID were in a rhythm. It's like you have your season, then you have your rest, then you have your pre-season, then season, rest. If there's an international tournament that involves players, that obviously comes into the mix, but you plan around that, whatever. But if you look at it now, right, you've had constant football since it came back, an itty bitty pre-season, probably just about no rest. Then if you're Teemu Pukki, Euro 2021 is going to be the highlight of your career, right? So you've got that on the horizon. So there's loads of factors at play here, and the sheer volume of games and the condensed period of time that there's going to be. Also, with Qatar being a Winter World Cup, right? It's going to be crazy the amount of games that football players are playing over the next sort of 2 years. It's just going to be ridiculous. So having two players who you can say, and Adam Ida, who's like probably a decent championship striker already. He's just not had the chance to prove it yet, right? But he's a high caliber player. He's now an international, you know. Norwich City are blessed with three superb striking options now. Superb striking options for the championship.
What about Josip Dermot, Stuart?
Oh, yeah. That's not happening. I got that wrong in a few podcasts. In fact, I tweeted a few weeks back just to say that, yeah, a few were leaving that I wasn't expecting. And I think I said I expected the club to maybe back Josip Dermot and think he could maybe do it in the championship. I was wrong. I hold my hands up. I was incorrect about that. Hence, Jordan Hugo got signed. And three brilliant strikers for Norwich in the championship. What a great acquisition. Really, really exciting. And the third player that's getting a 9 out of 10 from Hodge. I am massively, massively excited about this. And he is, more than any of the other signings, he's the one that makes me say we're going to finish top two, because I just feel that we don't just need Pukki's goals now. We don't just need to hope that he just steps up. I think Hugo's going to be enough for us.
I definitely agree. Now, I remember at the time, as I said, sort of the way I phrased my question was what and why, which expresses the confusion I had initially. But having sort of soaked it up, whatever, and the way he's been talking as well, he's so confident. And this is a player who has the right to be confident. He's off the back of his best season in the Championship, 15 goals, which is quite an achievement playing under Mark Warburton. But it's just, I'm so excited now because this whole Grant Holt point two really excites me. As you can tell from my little rant earlier, I really do rate Grant Holt. But like that type of player Norwich have needed, that type of player with a bit of personality, a bit of grit, a bit of desire. And when I say desire, I mean like visually, you can see them getting exhausted on the pitch. We know that. I don't want to question a player like Teemu Pukki's desire because he doesn't sort of show it as much as a player like Jordan Hugo maybe in terms of just sort of leaving it all on the pitch. But I think this signing is Norwich very much sort of covering every base. And I think Ben Bloom said this on the podcast I filmed the other day. Stuart Webber said for last season, he said a few months ago, he sent us to war without a gun. it's the complete opposite this time around. Daniel Farke, he's made 10 signings, isn't he? Or 11 signings now, sorry. And a lot of them will feature in the first team. And Daniel Farke is going to have such a selection headache. And the fact that, as you said, we've got Adam Eder, a very good young striker, Timu Pukki, a proven goal scorer who will find his form again, and now Jordan Hugill into the mix, who brings something so different. It's hard not to be excited, isn't it? And I won't lie, I was not annoyed or confused. I was just a bit like, a bit meh, because I hadn't followed the Championship the previous season. Every time I'd seen him at Carrow Road, he hadn't been particularly brilliant. But we very much know that Daniel Farke can turn that type of player around. And he's not even got to do that because he's off the back of his best season. But I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Jordan Hugill. Maybe that's a little bit low. You obviously went for, would you go for, Hodge, a 9?
9. He's the third that gets a 9.
9 as well.
9 as
Him
well.
and Kieran Dow at the top for me.
Him and you, that's fair enough. They're the two that I was hesitant about, the two that you're most excited about, which is very, very interesting. Although that's just, I suppose, how you do your research. Right, chaps, we're going to crack on. Now, I'm going to ask Jordan to mention that I forgot Danel Sinani. So in terms of watching this podcast and the viewers, you should know that by this point, I have forgotten, but we are going to talk about him. What are we making of Sinani? I've not got a rating for him, so this is going to come off the top of the dome. What are we saying about Danel Sinani? Because there's been a lot of love for him on Twitter. I think Ian Gabelli has led the old Sinani train, isn't he? What are we saying about Danel? I'll come to you, Hodgie, first.
Sinani was one of these, he came out of nowhere, and it's just one of these magnificent pieces of European scouting that's been done by Kieran Scott and Webber's sort of scouting team. Full of like some really, really good minds there. The people working at Coney on the recruitment side. And Norwich City's recruitment, even though for the Premier League last year it was an epic fail overall, given that they didn't throw that much at it. The recruitment sort of since Kieran Scott and Stuart Webber have been heading it up has been absolutely top drawer. And other clubs are looking at it with massive envy in terms of how we're plucking these gems from nowhere. And Sinani is, it's an exciting one. It's different. It's a player who's obviously coming from a totally different level of football, okay? Right? But this is a player who has excelled at that level of football. It's a player who has clearly a goal getter, right? But a total wild card. Like, you don't really know what you're getting here. You don't know if you're getting like a sort of like mobile version of Lee Trundle or a kind of something like Sherdan Shaqiri playing up front. It's like there's loads of different sort of comparisons and stuff you could make, but this is the one that in many ways is the most exciting because it's like you don't know what you're going to get and it could be something absolutely brilliant. Of the same token, it might be someone that just doesn't have what it takes to play for the first team at Norwich City. Either way, it's another player that is good to be bringing in on the basis of he's going to provide depth at the lower levels of the club. And yeah, I can understand Mr. Gabelli, who legend of Norwich City Twitter, I might add. I can understand his enthusiasm over the signing because this could be one that in 3 years' time we're like, how did we do that?
Did his manager say like he's surprised at how long he was working with him because he was far too good for Luxembourg?
Exactly, and that's the thing. If you look at the stats and the goal return as well, it's like did nobody else like think about this? Like what's happened there?
He's scoring in Europe as well, isn't he?
Well, that's the thing, and like if you look at the way he took his goals in those games as well, like that was the bit that really made me go, That's impressive, you know. It's like it's the movement, it's the way he creates the half angle for the shot. That's good predatory instincts. Like someone who was a master at that, like just Scottish hat on here. But Ali McCoist was not an amazing football player, but knew how to angle his body in order to finish a ball. A better example is probably Henrik Larsson, right? Who was a genius at that. Now, Sinani seems to have that sort of half angle. Kind of left-sided though, kind of like sort of dominant-sided, and I always like my striker to use both his feet a bit like Timu Pukki. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, he might not be a striker. He could be any number of things. I'm I'm just, I can't wait to see what happens. It's like, look at the smile on my face. I'm just like, yeah. But despite that, I'm only rating him a sort of 8 because I don't know what we're getting. But I think it's another really, really good piece of recruitment. I mean, overall, I don't think I've gone lower than a 7. And most of them have been 8 or higher. So that tells you how good the summer it's been.
Well, I think when you look at it from the financial point of view, it's a free transfer. I doubt he's going to come with a lot of baggage wage-wise, just because of the money in the league that he was in previously and his age. So just looking at that from a financial side of it, it's a no risk deal. The interesting thing which I'm just, I guess, anticipating is like you kind of alluded to, Hodge, is where he's going to play. Like, I've had some people say he's a number 10. I've had some people say he's number 9. I've had some people say he's a left winger. I don't really know where he's going to fit. I feel like he's just going to be one of those players which can kind of rotate between wherever is needed almost, because he's just got that kind of attacking threat that he possesses. There's not really too much that I can say about him, because I don't know anything about him other than
that's it.
Yeah,
and he might find a position. That's the thing. Like, one of the great things about football is how players sometimes can play one role for one club and excel in another for another. Like the most prominent example of that being Thierry Henry was a left winger before he went to Arsenal, and then Arsene Wenger's like, let's play him up front, and that worked really well, So on that basis, Sinani, just so exciting, isn't it?
He said he was a 10, didn't he, in his interview when he joined the club? But then he had all of his sort of success and scored a lot of his goals up front. So my natural assumption is that he is a 10, but he likes to sort of play up front. Because, I mean, if you've ever played football in your life, you don't like going up front, I think you're weird. Like, playing up front is proper fun and proper.
Nope.
Can't do it to save my life.
If you're good at it.
No.
It depends how deluded you are.
Hate it. Honestly, right? Like, I play at the back, so I like the game to be in front of me. Right, so this idea that I've got,
I play at the back as well. I don't like. I do like it, but like, I feel like there's more pressure at the back than there is up top, because it's
man.
No, listen, there definitely is, because you miss an open goal, you can score another. You let a goal in, all of a sudden you're getting berated.
Nah. Right, see, I've got that mindset of, like, if I'm at the back and someone's pressing me and I can't go back to my keeper, I just put the ball out of play. It's like that old Scottish technical sort of mentality of just get rid, empty the ball. And I like the game in front of me. This idea that I've got to be making runs and anticipating where the ball's going to come over my head, away you go, man. The lowest I'm playing's like a sitting midfield row. That's as high as I'm going up the field, man.
That's pretty fair enough. I mean, I played left back, and you can make it that what you will, but like, you have to do it all, really. Probably the toughest position to play, but I managed it for a number of years. What are we making of Danel Sinani then, overall rating wise? Jesus,
I'll go for an 8.
8. You said 8, didn't you, Hodge? You said 8 or 7? You said 8.
No, I said 8.
I'll go for an 8 as well. It just, the idea of a European player coming to Norwich always sort of tickles my fancy, and I think he's an interesting player, to say the least. I thought he was a winger initially. I think in a video that I made many months ago now, when his name was mentioned, I think it was the end of January, wasn't it? I was like, I thought this guy was a winger, and at the time he was meant to be a pacey winger, so I thought that's what Norwich need. We've brought one of them in at least, as well as Danel Sinani. I still feel like an absolute plonker for forgetting him, but I'll go with an 8 as well. Now we're going to speak about Mr. Ben Gibson at last. A very interesting signing. Every single Norwich fan, myself included, at some point within sort of the last year, has said we need another centre-back. Now, for me personally, it's not really been due to a lack of quality within the existing 4, but mainly because injuries. And, for as much as you can say, it might not happen again, I don't think Norwich, especially now, are in a position where they can take that gamble. And if you bring a player like Ben Gibson, the fact that he's got this sort of undeniable quality, he's got a good sort of career behind him, makes him for an interesting signing. But I'm going to let you go first, Alfie, and then I'm going to do my best to sort of try and tell you why you might be wrong.
What I'll say is first, right, is that I'm really happy, to be honest, whoever we got to fill that kind of void of that kind of depth that we clearly need a kind of centre back. So whether this is Ben Gibson or someone else, I think, in all honesty, I'd have rated it quite highly, because I think that was the one area of the market which we really needed to kind of get into. Yeah. I definitely think that there's an argument to be said that the best Ben Gibson would have been probably about 3 years ago, really, in his Borough days before he moved, because you don't know what kind of player. because I think it's interesting to see. I mean, right, he's a 27-year-old right now. From what I've read up on him, he is someone who, and I think he mentioned it in his interview, which he had with us, he's someone who wears his heart on his sleeve. And I think he's well aware of, I guess, not like a personal like embarrassment or anything, but the kind of mental impact it would have had on him, his move, and then the lack of play time and the kind of way he was just kind of tossed to one side at Burnley. And that always can go two ways with a player when they come here, because he can either come here, it can be the best thing to happen. And of course, I hope that's the case. We've seen a lot of that come through with, your Timo Pukkis and your Tom Tribals in that first couple of seasons, so many more. But there's still always that kind of bit about me where I'm like, what if it's not the right move, or he's not the same player as what happened when he was playing week in, week out for his home kind of club for Borough. And that's my only thing for me is this the same Ben Gibson we're going to get, which we always went, God, when we would beat him in the playoff final, let's get that Ben Gibson, what a centre half he would be. But
weird game to choose to pick a player.
Well, yeah, but I think that was when I first really looked at him. I was kind of like, I mean, they beat us twice, and they were so good defensively. I remember when they went up, they conceded like one of the lowest amount of goals, but they just couldn't score. And he was part of that defense, and he was such a good defender.
Yeah.
And if we get that player, he is honestly someone that could genuinely make a huge difference to us potentially going up next year. But it just depends what player we get.
We should bring back Ayala as well. Like that should be that should be the move. No, like in fairness, Alfie, I totally get where you're coming from with that. My thing I would say just on the age is, it's like it comes back to the old market conditions thing. What fee would we have paid for Ben Gibson at that point?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Considerably higher than we're getting now. And the idea of a player coming hungry to prove himself, and just alongside Jordan Hugill as well, I've got to say, I'm very impressed with like putting Hugill and Gibson in a box, right? They are players of a good age to be signing, because we bring so many young players in, right, that it's good to be bringing people of that age where they're maybe just about to come into their prime potentially. And they've got enough experience behind them that they can lean on and rely on, and they come in as leaders, as voices in the dressing room, not people looking to kind of find their feet. They'll know that their voice can carry a bit of weight. They've had different types of experiences, and both of those players are going to be hungry for different reasons. And I've got to say, in terms of the way they presented themselves in their initial comments on their unveiling, really, really, really strong from both of them. And on that basis, makes both of them really exciting signings. However, Ben Ambrose with the case for the prosecution, I believe, or defence, or what's happening here?
I'm going to weaken it immediately by saying that where you said the way they speak and the way they've spoken has sort of been good. That's from yesterday. I put a message in our group chat, and I was like, he started to speak, and I'm starting to think, maybe I am excited for it. But my hesitation was it came from the fact that, as you mentioned, Alfie, this is a guy who's not played for 2 years. He's battled against injury and attitude. There's no hiding from that. Sean Dyche has made it quite clear that it's not been a pleasure to work with him. He said he's a guy.
It's been very difficult work with Ben.
I'm glad it was you who did that impression and not me, because I did not want to embarrass myself, but you've crushed that. But he's a guy who's gone head to head with Sean Dyche. He must have a lot about him, because I don't think I'd fancy that. But we've seen that type of player at Norwich before, definitely. And we've seen it work. You mentioned a couple of good names there. But my hesitation came from the fact that I now lack patience for that. Because Norwich City and now, it's crunch time for Daniel Farke. There's no hiding from that at all. And I probably do, but I don't think I have that patience to watch this player sort of find himself again, which is a little bit hypocritical, because there are a few players on this list who are going to have to do that. But I think it's a different thing to adapt to a league than to actually find yourself just as a footballer again. But I don't know if I have the patience for it, which is my sort of question. And also, I mentioned earlier, I never really thought we lacked the quality at the back. Grant Hanley is absolutely superb. He was really good before his injury and before lockdown in the Premier League, and that was a fully fit Grant Hanley. So I imagine he would rip it up in the Championship again, although he's currently got a long-term injury, hasn't he? Tim Closer, the jury's still out on him. I'm still very unsure of whether he'll make a proper return, or wait until he maybe gets a fairer run in the team. as opposed to sort of a few games after lockdown, after almost a full year out of the game. Ben Godfrey is really good. He'll be very good in the Championship. I don't know if he's going to stay here or not. Again, you've got that sort of looming sense of this October 5th deadline day, which really makes me question whether he'll stay. This signing sort of nudges me in the direction that he won't. And Christoph Zimmerman, who he blew hot and cold in the Premier League. I think he's decent. I think he'll be very good in the Championship again. And obviously, he's just an absolute colossus in terms of being a leader as well as a man as well. He's just huge, isn't he? Exactly. He's got big old biceps, a massive chest, and he scares the life out of me. But I never thought there was a lack of quality that needed to be changed. And, you know, when I went on my sort of little monologue about Sorensen and Skip, I was like, that's the bit I want to fix, because Norwich City are not going to be able to fix this defensive issue and sort of the goals conceded whilst trying to play this attacking football. You can do a Jurgen Klopp, you can splash £8 million on Virgil van Dijk. Can Norwich City do that? No, they can't. Our equivalent is literally Ben Gibson for £2 million on loan and then potentially another 6. But I always thought the issue was in front of the back four. So I was a bit like, if you're going to take a financial gamble, stick it there instead, because maybe it's just from the fact that I think a player like that brings a bit more entertainment value, can score the odd screamer, whatever. But my hesitation came from there. But literally, I'm going to weaken it in terms of this idea of he spoke very, very well. He was, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm ready to give it all for Norwich. And I'm just sat there like, there it goes again. I'm just sort of at a loss at the moment. I really don't know what to make of it. And as you mentioned, Alfie, if we can have this Ben Gibson from a few years ago, the Ben Gibson that took Borough into the Premier League. I think he was okay in the Premier League, but they just couldn't score much like the season before. Then we've got ourselves a hell of a player. And also there's this whole like left-footed nonsense. I'm like, that doesn't matter at all to me, because Tim Closer can use his left foot well enough.
I think but it is quite important, because you've got to balance the centre of your defence as well. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a left-footed player as the left-sided centre-back, Ben Godfrey being proof of that. Mm. But a player's got to become more on their comfortable side. It does help them play just that little bit better. And what you've got to think of is defence is like 9/10 of being a defender is positional awareness and sort of knowing where to be in terms of the overall shape of the defence and what's happening around you and where the guy that you're meant to be marking is, whatever. Now, with that in mind, Ben Gibson, having him so that if Ben Godfrey does go, you've got someone that's really, really natural and touching wood, I'm doing the table on my head for good measure, doesn't have the injury problems that some of our other defenders have had. That is quite an important thing for me. That is an important facet of this, is making sure that we've got someone. We've basically, what we've done is, with our recruitment, we've built a squad that's strong enough to stand the rigours of a crazily rapid sort of flurry of games in the Championship and everything else that's going on in COVID, like making everything sort of even more condensed. But as well as that, we've done that much recruitment that we have basically mitigated any problems should we lose any of the crown jewels on deadline day, pretty much. I mean, the only one that I would say where there's a bit of a question mark is on the right side of defence. If Max Aarons was to go, I would maybe like one more option there. But, you know...
You'd need one, wouldn't you?
Yeah. But I think overall on all of it, and even like the likes of the other players that we're not mentioning here in this one's like your Melvin Cities and the like, I mean, there's just so much going on in terms of the recruitment. If you look at not just the summer, but before that and the whole period, I think overall they have absolutely smashed it out the park. Ben Gibson, I'm giving an 8.5. And overall, I'm giving the recruitment team like a very, very solid 9 out of 10. It's probably higher than what my average will come to, because I only gave 3 players individually a 9 out of 10. But I think overall as a recruitment period, it's like it's a 9 or a 9.5 out of 10 they need to get, because of the volume and the fact that none of the signings are big risk, not one. And all of them have a purpose. All of them have something that they can quite tangibly and discernibly, you can see add that is different. Plaheta is, whether it works or not, it's a different option. It's something different, you know. Ballymumba, is one that we've managed to pluck where no one else has seen it. Daniel Sinani's a wild card. You've got proven players like Gibson, like Hugo coming in. It's been a brilliant summer. It's been a great summer's recruitment, and I've got to give my hats off to the recruitment team. The caveat I would put on that is, Mr. Farker, you've got the tools. As you said, like, it was a good point, Ben. Going into war without a gun, we're now going into war with like heavy artillery, and we've got to make sure we do the bizzle.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing for me as well is that not every one of these signings is going to work out. You know, you look at the most successful window, which would be, what was it, the 18-19. Ben Marshall was brought in that season as well. Not all of these signings work out. I'm not going to sit there and ask you who sort of is the least likely to succeed, because that would be just sort of ridiculous. But I am so keen. I said this before. Placheta, yeah, sure. But I'm very keen to skip forward 9 months or however long it is until the season ends, to then think about who was successful, who wasn't, how right or wrong we were. You were going to say something then, Alfie, sorry.
All I was going to say is that literally the last thing I wanted to say was, all I hope is that for our sake, with how our previous, I guess, more expensive signings have kind of planned out for us, because of that absolute obligation to buy if we go up, I just hope he plays a role if we do go up, because the thought of like him sitting injured all season, then we absolutely cruise the league, and we're like, yeah, here's £8 million in total for a player that was injured the whole time. I hope for our sake and for Ben's sake, not you,
my sake, yeah,
the other Ben's, yeah, that at least we use that clause to a positive, is what I'll say.
I think the club, so that we can distinguish between the two, I think the club are calling him Gibble. So, yeah.
Did you say Gibbo or Gibble?
No. Yeah, Gibbo. Oh, if I'm speaking in proper RT.
You would just question me then, Hodge.
Gibble. Oh, this is the old. Oh, Hodge, go up and get us a Carlsberg. Know what I mean? Carlsberg. Right. So, there we go. Piss taken out of my accent. Yeah. Do you know what? I've been on so many Norwich City podcasts, and this is the first time I've had my accent taking the piss out of in a long time. So kudos for that.
I'll say it doesn't happen enough, does it, Hodge? I took my England top off this time. I don't want to annoy you too much.
Well, no, that's exactly why I wore this bad boy. It was a revenge.
That one doesn't quite rattle me too much. Although, you know, I'm a little bit sad from the fact we had to celebrate drawing with you a few years ago.
No. Well, if Stuart Armstrong clears the ball, then Lee Griffiths has like a plinth on my mantelpiece. No, sorry, a statue on my plinth on my mantelpiece. Anyway, yeah, no, you wore an England top the last time. I wore a Scotland top this time. I hope that is noted.
We'll come in together at some point. Hopefully England and Scotland play. We'll do a little watch along, and we can just sort of sit there.
That is absolutely happening, and yeah, that could. My journalistic career could be over after that, because yeah, I might swear so profusely. My mum might come in and embarrass me. Like if I was doing a watch along, right, and I was recording it at my mum's house, she'd probably come in, Stuart, why are you doing all that swearing? That's what I would get.
Because you just pointed at the TV, 12-0 to England.
Watching, it's not going to be 12, and also like we play better against better teams, so yeah, you probably will beat us. Ha ha ha. No, drawing with Israel was miserable, like just miserable. I'm miserable about that, and it kind of put me off the idea of wearing this, but I had to do it because you wore an England top last time. I cannot let that stand.
That's totally fair enough. Right, guys, what are our final comments? I've done mine. Mine was the whole, like, not everyone's going to work out. What's everyone's sort of final comments on this window? Although I feel like you've done yours as well, Hodgie, when you said how good it was. We'll go to you, Alfie, then, to wrap it up.
I'm just really excited. I think as a football fan, when you have 10 new faces in, I think realistically you're aware, like you say, that not everyone's going to work out, but you're still... Everyone loves a good transfer, don't you? Like, you just love that thought of, like, you know, no one in this list, even if it was an awful sign, it's going to be rated really poorly, because you just have this heightened expectation for for wanting that player to do well. So I think they've smashed it on paper. And like with everything else, it's down to the management team now. There's no excuses. We talked about it last a lot, especially myself and Billy. We spoke about, like I said, the plan Bs and has Farker time run out and etc. And I think, like I say, this is the part for me now where we go, right, we've given you all the tools. We've spent more than we've ever really spent under Weber by quite a drastic amount. It's the strongest squad that we've assembled in a good 4 or 5 years. Let's have it.
One question. I'm quite eager to end up because I'm a 31-year-old that's about to play a
I
football.
was literally about to say we've timed it quite well, haven't we?
We have, but I'm just going to throw a question into the mix just for you guys because I'm interested to know. See if we went up with this squad, right? Do you think this squad, based on the recruitment this summer, would have a better go at the Premier League than the one that we went up with last summer did?
Yeah, 100%. We've definitely
Because
strengthened this summer.
No, yeah,
Right.
literally more players.
Yeah,
That's what I'm going to say.
I'm of the same mind, but I just thought that's an interesting thing to think about in terms of how we view this overall thing. Exciting times. And we've got another trip to Kenilworth Road soon enough. So yeah, no problem. No problem with it. Yeah, exactly.
We'll go and right the wrongs.
Yeah. No problem with the Luton defeat.
Bring the men's squad this time, teach him a lesson.
Right, Alfie, we'll turn to you first. In terms of socials, where are we looking?
Oh God, you test me now. This is usually Billy's job. You can find us on Twitter if you want to kind of get into a little bit of a debate with us at the Revere end. We've also got a band as well, which is the Revere Band. You can find that if you like any kind of indie music. If you want to have a listen to us talk, we've had both you guys on the podcast before, which is great. So I can say on Spotify you can find all Apple Podcasts, all of our stuff. Just type in the Revere End podcast, and it's all on there.
By the way, I would highly recommend that anyone does that. Anyone that consumes Norwich Talk should consume the Revere End and put up with me sometimes. I'm at Hodge the Hack on Twitter. That's HODGEY the Hack, because people always write Hodge HODGY, which is a bugbear of mine. But HODGEY the Hack, Hodge the Hack, and other stuff may be coming soon. Watch this space.
Pending.
Yep. No, more like loading. Right.
Loading, sorry.
And it just depends how fast my sort of mental hard drive is, how quickly we get it to the point that it's going to happen. But yeah, stuff is in the offing.
Certainly is. Guys, it's been a pleasure. It's been really fun.
Hi.
Again, screw you, Billy. We're glad you weren't
here. Well, thank you for having me.
Here, though. Yeah, we'll get you guys on again. You mentioned earlier, Hodge. This is a good trio. I was going to say a good three-way. This is a good trio. Very enjoyable. If you can like the video, anyone really, I'll be very, very grateful. Subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Until next time, we'll see you again very, very soon.